Yes, I got them in. I'm pretty surprised that you were able to record all those lines that fast. Boy, I tell you, this upcoming Forgotten Media co-op episode is coming along much smoother than, sorry, I gotta go. Talk to you later, Luke. Welcome to another episode of Forgotten Media, where I dig up some stuff you may or may not have heard of, and... Oh, wait, what was today's episode again? Oh, right. When it comes to Sega and their franchises, the most popular one is obviously Sonic the Hedgehog, but for everybody else that they've created in the past, they all get thrown down the gutter. Out of the sea of abandoned Sega franchises, it feels like NiGHTS is the most recognizable one out of the bunch, and that series only had 2 games, Nights and Dreams and NiGHTS Journey of Dreams. And no, I don't count Christmas Nights, because from what I've seen, it's just the first game, but with Christmas themes and a different story thrown in. Feels more like a special edition rather than a standalone title. But it is interesting, a series that has gained a good amount of fans, or people who remember it. The character has made numerous appearances in Sonic games, and yet Sega can't be bothered to make another NiGHTS game. Now, I won't be covering the games, since they're not that forgotten, especially since the first game is available on Steam, but for this episode, we'll be taking a look at the comics based off of the first game. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that there were comics based off of NiGHTS. That's right, the NiGHTS comics, made by Archie Comics, the same company that makes the Sonic the Hedgehog and Mega Man comics. The NiGHTS comics began its run on February of 1998 as a 3-issue miniseries. The story begins in the Dream Dimension, the magical dreamland where the evil creature named Wiseman has plans in getting to the real world, or the waking world as they call it, and sends Riala and NiGHTS to do his bidding. One day, NiGHTS rebels against Wiseman and steals the 2 red ideas, magical orbs that Wiseman uses to open a portal to the waking world. To make sure that Wiseman's plans fail, he throws the orbs into the portal to the waking world while receiving a shard from the orbs that glues onto its chest. The orbs land in a small town where local Architect sees the 2 orbs crash to the ground, thus inspiring him to name the town Twin Seeds. Over the years, the NiGHTOPia creatures Nap and Snuzz search for the new dreamers that possess the idea's energy and help NiGHTS stop Wiseman from conquering the waking world. One weird thing about this comic is that they labeled NiGHTS as a male. When I saw NiGHTS for the first time, I always thought it was a female, but nope, it turns out NiGHTS is genderless, so it could be either one. But for the sake of this episode and to avoid some confusion, I'm going to label NiGHTS as a male. So, with the story out of the way, it's time for a cast call. NiGHTS is the mischievous civilian in Night Dimension, and a former henchman to Wiseman. Riala is Wiseman's most trusted henchman, and despises NiGHTS a lot for his actions. Wiseman himself is the mysterious evil creature that has big plans for the Night Dimension and the waking world. And then there's Nap and Snuzz, 2 NiGHTOPia creatures that help the new dreamers in the Night Dimension. In the waking world, we have our 2 dreamers, Elliot, who wants to become the best basketball player, and Clarice, a girl who has a wonderful voice, but has stage fright and is scared of strict judges. There's also Roger, Elliot's rival in basketball, and later becomes an assistant to Riala later on. Since this story is an adaptation of NiGHTS in the Dreams, there are a lot of familiar locations, characters, and items taken straight from the game. It also goes a little more in-depth on the game's story, since the game had a pretty basic story, but this one goes a little more in-depth, give it more grit and whatnot. There's also a segment where Snuzz gets captured by Jackal, and is fused with a Nightmarian creature, creating a fusion hybrid called Mepan, which looks completely different than what I've seen from the game. He sorta has a split personality of being good and evil, but they don't really show it that often, and that form doesn't last long anyway. Also, some of the dialogue in the story sounds too much like something that Sonic the Hedgehog would say. For doing an adaptation in 3 issues, the story can be fast at times. If this was a story told in 5 issues, then I'm sure they could have had more room to breathe. But overall, it's okay. Writing is okay, the artwork is okay, and it does a decent job in staying close to the source material. The miniseries sold well, and it was enough to make another miniseries of NiGHTS. After Elliot and Clarice defeat Wiseman, NiGHTS finds himself stuck in the waking world. At first he likes exploring the new world, but he soon becomes unwelcome from the civilians, and later starts to slowly fade away from being in the waking world too long. Now that Wise Guy is out of the picture, Riala crowns himself as the ruler of Nightmare Land, and plots his revenge against NiGHTS, with Roger doing his bidding. So now it's up to Elliot and Clarice to rescue NiGHTS and stop Riala before NiGHTS fades away into nothing. Oh yeah, Ken Penders does the coloring in this miniseries. You know, that former Archie Sonic writer that caused a lot of drama back then? Yeah, now he's busy doing his own thing, the Laura Sue Chronicles, or as I like to call it, the plagiarizing Sega-fied Star Trek knockoff project. The second series tries something new in creating a whole new story and expanding the NiGHTS universe, and this was obviously made years before we got a proper sequel to NiGHTS. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten around to playing the second NiGHTS game myself, so don't expect any references or mentions of that game in this episode. We get to see some familiar faces again, as well as some new ones, and, well, honestly, these new characters are not that interesting. The only one that I remember is Lieutenant O'Lawful, a member of Twin Siege police force who doesn't take crap from nobody. The story kinda goes all over the place, because there's NiGHTS being stuck in the real world, then there's something about people having strange dreams that is never explained, and then out of nowhere, there's a terrorist plot! Yes, there are freaking terrorists in this story that plan on blowing up the Twin Siege tower because they don't like it. It would have been better if they explained that Riala was responsible for making everyone to have strange dreams and finding new recruits, and comes across the terrorist group and convinces them to blow up the tower so that he can get his revenge. The art style looks like crap in this second miniseries, at least the first one was okay. Most of the time it looks odd or very rough, and other times it looks like I'm sorry, it's just I can't keep a straight face from seeing that. Well, anyway, that's about it for this story. It tries to do something new, but the story needs a rewrite and better artists. Unlike the first miniseries, this one didn't do so well in selling copies, and thanks to that, it wasn't enough to continue the comics or make it into a monthly comic series. So after the sixth and final issue that was released on October of 1998, the NiGHTS comics were cancelled and never seen again. The only time we would see elements of NiGHTS in the Archie comics is from the Sonic the Hedgehog comics. There are very few cameos in the Sonic comics. In fact, I remember when Saffron B used to carry around a plush toy of a Nightopian at one point. The only time that NiGHTS would make a physical return to Archie comics was in Worlds Unite, the second Sonic and Mega Man crossover that features a ton of different Sega and Capcom franchises, like Street Fighter, Alex Kidd, Beautiful Joe, Skies of Arcadia, Okame, and of course, NiGHTS himself. Although I still wish Vector Man was featured in that crossover. Since the comics were never reprinted, they're usually rare and very expensive, ranging from $25 all the way to $50, so good luck trying to find all 6 of them. In conclusion, the NiGHTS comics are a mixed bag. The first miniseries was okay, while the second miniseries wasn't that good. I would only recommend this for hardcore NiGHTS fans, but if you're that interested in reading them, then I only suggest reading the first miniseries. Well, that wraps up this episode of Forgotten Media, so this is Melting Man 234 signing out. Now, I won't be covering the games, since they're... When I saw NiGHTS for the first time, I always thought it was a... And when I first saw NiGHTS for the first time, and I screwed it up. There's locations and items taken straight from the game in this comic. It also goes up... wow, that went a little high for me. There are a lot of familiar locations, characters, and... it's dumb. Since this comic is an adaptation of Nights in the Dreams, there are a lot of familiar locations, enemies, and items taken straight from the game. And the story in this... There are several familiar locations, characters, and enemies taken straight from the game. Wait. I think I screwed that up. Darn it. Since this story is an adaptation of Nights in the Dreams, there are a lot of familiar locations, characters, and enemies taken straight from... I keep saying enemies, I have to say items. Characters, enemies, characters, items, and... With this... Great, I don't know how to start this off. proper sequel to the Knights games. And this second miniseries tries to expand the world of Knights, going more in-depth and having more... No. I need the script piece better. Hardcore Knights fans, but if you're really the... $25 all the way to $50. Darn it, I forgot the next line. Since the comics are... Wait, I gotta look at the script again. Since the comics are rare... Since the comics never... But if you're really interested in what that comic is all about...